Hello and welcome to Rapid Report, where global strategy meets sharp analysis. Tonight, we bring you a story that may redefine the balance of power in North America and beyond. While Washington intensifies military operations abroad, reshaping global security calculations, something equally significant, though far quieter, is unfolding on the economic front. As U.S. forces escalate their campaign against Iran under President Donald Trump, oil markets surge, geopolitical tensions spike, and uncertainty grips the global system. But as America focuses on military projection, Canada is making a calculated move. Prime Minister Mark Carney is executing what analysts describe as a strategic economic pivot toward Asia, locking in energy agreements, expanding critical mineral partnerships, and preparing for the high-stakes 2026 review of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Is this coincidence, or is this timing by design? Tonight on Rapid Report, we break down how rising oil prices are strengthening Canada's fiscal leverage, why India, Japan, and Australia are central to Ottawa's new strategy, how U.S. military distraction may reshape trade negotiations, and what this means for the future of North American economic power. This is more than energy. This is more than diplomacy. This is about leverage, sovereignty, and timing in a volatile world. Stay with us as we unpack the strategy behind the silence. And if you value sharp geopolitical analysis without noise or bias, make sure to subscribe to Rapid Report right now. Like this video to support independent reporting and share it so others can understand the deeper forces shaping our world. Let's begin. While Donald Trump directs American military power toward a dramatic confrontation with Iran, Canada is quietly executing one of the most calculated geopolitical pivots in its modern history. Led by Prime Minister Mark Carney, Ottawa is leveraging rising oil prices, U.S. strategic distraction, and the looming review of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, to reposition itself economically toward Asia. What appears on the surface to be coincidence is, in fact, timing of extraordinary precision. Canada moves, while the United States is at war. As Washington intensifies military operations against Tehran, described by some U.S. officials as a campaign aimed at crippling Iran's regional influence, global markets react immediately. Warships mobilize, oil futures surge, risk premiums spike across the Strait of Hormuz. In this environment, energy exporting nations stand to gain. Canada is one of them. The escalation drives oil prices sharply upward, moving benchmarks from the $60 range to $70 and beyond. Analysts warn that if shipping through Hormuz is disrupted, prices could approach $100 per barrel. For Canada, one of the world's largest oil exporters, this translates into billions in additional revenue almost overnight. And on the very day U.S. military deployment peaks, Carney lands in India. The optics are striking. While Washington focuses on military force, Ottawa focuses on long-term contracts. Energy windfall becomes strategic leverage. Higher oil prices are not merely a fiscal bonus, they are geopolitical leverage. Canada's producers gain expanded cash flow. Provincial governments collect increased royalties. Federal fiscal flexibility improves. But Carney's government does not treat this windfall as temporary profit. It treats it as negotiation capital. During high-level meetings in New Delhi, Canada advances discussions covering liquefied natural gas, LNG supply, uranium exports, critical minerals essential for battery manufacturing and clean energy transitions. Carney had previously warned that U.S. economic volatility and tariff unpredictability could cost Canada up to $50 billion annually. His pivot signals preparation rather than reaction. By strengthening energy ties with Asian powers at a moment of global instability, Canada sends a message. It will not remain structurally dependent on a single market. The USMCA review window. The United States-Mexico-Canada agreement faces a formal review on July 1st, 2026. These reviews are not symbolic. They determine tariff frameworks, dispute mechanisms, and sectoral protections. Historically, the United States has held overwhelming leverage. Approximately 75–95% of Canadian exports flow south of the border. But the timing of current events alters the equation. With Washington consumed by overseas military escalation, its political bandwidth narrows. Trade renegotiations require sustained attention, domestic coalition building, and diplomatic capital. War absorbs all three. Canada sees a rare window. Diversification efforts underway now, particularly in energy and commodities, aim to reduce vulnerability before USMCA talks intensify. If Canada can demonstrate credible alternative markets, U.S. leverage diminishes. A landmark uranium agreement resets Canada-India relations. The most consequential development may be the $2.6 billion uranium supply agreement signed between Canada and India, covering 2027 to 2035. Relations between Ottawa and New Delhi have experienced periods of diplomatic strain in recent years. Yet strategic necessity reshapes priorities. India is planning one of the world's largest nuclear energy expansions. To reduce carbon emissions while sustaining growth, it requires stable uranium supply chains. Canada, home to some of the highest-grade uranium deposits globally, fits that need perfectly. The agreement is more than commercial. It represents diplomatic normalization anchored in energy interdependence. Reducing structural dependence on the U.S. Canada's export profile has long reflected geographic inevitability. Proximity to the United States created efficient supply chains and deep integration, but dependency also created vulnerability. New trade and energy agreements with India and China unlock an estimated $13 billion in Asian markets in the near term. Canada and India aim to double bilateral trade to $70 billion by 2030 and finalize a comprehensive trade agreement within the year. Diversification is no longer theoretical, it is quantifiable. Oil market dynamics supercharge the strategy. War risk premiums amplify Canada's advantage. As Middle Eastern routes face instability and Russian supply remains politically constrained in Western markets, Asian buyers seek reliability. Canada's Pacific Pipeline expansion, designed specifically to move oil to the West Coast for shipment to Asia, was built for this moment. Rather than flowing exclusively to U.S. refineries, Canadian crude increasingly targets India, China, Japan, Australia. Asian energy importers view Canada as politically stable, rule-based, and geographically secure from conflict zones. This perception becomes strategic capital. Coalition of middle powers. Carney's framing extends beyond economics. He positions Canada within a broader coalition of middle powers, seeking balance amid intensifying U.S.-China rivalry. India, Australia, and Japan all aim to diversify economic dependencies, whether from American trade unpredictability or Chinese supply chain dominance. Canada presents itself as a stable democracy, a reliable energy exporter, a predictable regulatory partner, a supplier of critical minerals essential to clean technology. Rather than choosing sides in great power competition, Ottawa is strengthening ties with multiple actors simultaneously. Implications for the USMCA showdown. When USMCA review negotiations begin in earnest, the landscape will look different from previous rounds. Canada will approach talks with higher fiscal strength due to elevated energy revenues, active trade channels in Asia, long-term uranium and LNG contracts outside the U.S., expanded Pacific export infrastructure. If Washington threatens tariffs, it must weigh domestic consequences. Higher tariffs on Canadian goods could exacerbate U.S. inflation, especially during wartime when energy prices are already elevated. In previous negotiations, the U.S. advantage was structural. This time, Canada may possess credible alternatives. A deliberate and well-timed pivot. This strategy is not accidental. It uses 1. Elevated oil prices created by global instability. U.S. political distraction during military escalation. A defined timeline before USMCA review. Asia's expanding energy demands. Growing middle power alignment. Most Canadians express pride in what they see as strategic foresight. Rather than reacting defensively to American volatility, Canada is proactively reshaping its economic architecture. While Washington focuses on military dominance abroad, Ottawa is quietly recalibrating its trade geography. The long-term question is not whether this pivot weakens U.S.-Canada ties. Those ties remain deep and structural. The real question is whether Canada's diversification reduces the asymmetry that has defined North American trade for decades. If the strategy succeeds, the 2026 USMCA negotiations may mark a turning point where Canada no longer negotiates from dependency, but from balance. In geopolitics, timing is power, and at this moment, Canada appears to be moving precisely when the global system is distracted. A quiet redefinition of Canadian economic sovereignty. For decades, North American integration was treated as economic inevitability. Geographic proximity to the United States ensured logistical efficiency, massive trade volumes, and regulatory alignment. But dependency, estimated between 75% and 95% of Canadian exports, also created structural vulnerability. Every U.S. tariff threat, every polarized election cycle in Washington, every protectionist shift carried economic risk for Canada. What Prime Minister Mark Carney is doing now is not merely signing energy contracts. He is recalibrating the structural balance of power with the United States. Economic sovereignty does not mean rupture. It means optionality. War as a geoeconomic accelerator. The American military campaign against Iran functions as a catalyst. Historically, major conflicts reshape global trade flows. Instability in the Strait of Hormuz automatically raises geopolitical risk premiums on oil. For Canada, this produces 3 simultaneous effects. 1. Increased energy revenues. 2. Accelerated Asian demand for politically stable suppliers. 3. Inflationary pressure inside the United States, limiting Washington's room for aggressive trade action. Thus, the conflict indirectly amplifies Canada's economic leverage, without Canada being militarily involved. It is a strategic use of global instability, not through confrontation, but through timing. The USMCA review, a rare window of U.S. vulnerability. The scheduled 2026 review of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is a critical moment. Historically, Washington has dominated North American trade negotiations. But if the U.S. administration under Donald Trump is consumed by sustained military engagement, its capacity to simultaneously wage a high-intensity trade confrontation diminishes. Imposing new tariffs on Canada during elevated oil prices could exacerbate U.S. inflation, disrupt industrial supply chains, alienate voters in key border states. Canada understands that a United States focused on military escalation is a United States with reduced economic flexibility. Timing, again, is leverage. India as a strategic anchor. The strengthening partnership with India is not symbolic, it is structural. India is pursuing one of the world's largest nuclear energy expansions. To meet climate and growth targets, it requires reliable uranium suppliers and diversified energy partners. Canada, with its vast uranium reserves and regulatory stability, fits that requirement. But uranium is only the beginning. The broader strategic agenda includes long-term LNG supply agreements, critical mineral cooperation, lithium, nickel, cobalt, clean energy technology, partnerships, expanded trade architecture, targeting $71 billion by 2030. This resets bilateral relations on the foundation of mutual strategic necessity rather than temporary diplomacy. China and strategic pragmatism. Despite past diplomatic tensions, Canada cannot ignore China's central role in global supply chains and energy demand. The pivot toward Asia reflects pragmatism, not alignment. Ottawa's approach appears calibrated. Engage economically. Avoid ideological entanglement. Maintain regulatory independence. This reduces over-reliance on the U.S. market while avoiding exclusive dependency on China. Diversification, not substitution, is the objective. Pacific infrastructure as strategic insurance. Canada's Pacific export expansion, designed to move oil and LNG westward, represents infrastructure as geopolitical insurance. Historically, Canadian energy flowed overwhelmingly south. Now, expanded Pacific capacity allows direct access to Asian markets. Each additional shipment to India, Japan, or other Indo-Pacific partners reduces structural dependence on U.S. refiners. Infrastructure shapes power. Export routes define negotiation leverage. Coalition of Middle Powers, Carney, frames this strategy within a broader alignment of middle powers. States that are not superpowers but possess strategic weight. Countries such as India, Japan, and Australia seek greater autonomy amid intensifying U.S.-China rivalry. They aim to diversify supply chains, secure critical minerals, and avoid overdependence on any single dominant actor. Canada positions itself as a stable democracy, a predictable regulatory environment, a reliable long-term energy supplier, a neutral but capable economic partner. In an era of polarization, stability becomes a competitive advantage. The strategic risks. No pivot is risk-free. Potential vulnerabilities include 1. A rapid de-escalation in the Middle East that lowers oil prices. 2. U.S. retaliation if Washington interprets diversification as strategic defiance. 3. Exposure to volatility within Asian markets themselves. The success of the strategy depends on balance, asserting autonomy without provoking rupture. Long-term transformation. If successful, this pivot could mark a generational shift in Canada's economic identity. Less structurally dependent on a single market, more integrated into Indo-Pacific growth, more resilient against U.S. political cycles, better positioned for strategic negotiation in 2026. This is not anti-American policy. It is asymmetry correction. While the United States exercises military power abroad, Canada is expanding economic power quietly. And when USMCA negotiations intensify, the difference between dependency and diversification may determine the real balance of power in North America. Great powers often move loudly. Strategic powers move deliberately. What we are witnessing is not simply a reaction to global instability. It is strategic positioning. While the United States channels its energy into military confrontation, Canada appears to be channeling instability into opportunity, strengthening Asian partnerships, expanding export routes, and quietly preparing for a decisive trade negotiation in 2026. If this strategy succeeds, Canada will enter the next phase of North American economic talks with diversified markets, enhanced fiscal strength, and reduced structural vulnerability. In geopolitics, power is not only about force, it is about leverage. And leverage often belongs to those who move while others are distracted. The coming months will reveal whether this pivot reshapes Canada's long-term economic trajectory and whether Washington recalibrates in response. We will continue to monitor every development, every negotiation, and every strategic shift. If you found this analysis valuable, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Rapid Report for in-depth global coverage, share this report with colleagues, friends, and anyone who wants to understand the forces behind today's headlines. Your engagement helps us continue delivering serious analysis in a world flooded with noise. Thank you for watching Rapid Report. Stay informed, stay strategic. See you in the next report.